A street boy approached a billionaire with the most shocking news. Your wife kidnapped your children. What the billionaire discovered next exposed a twisted plot that would destroy his family forever. A desperate mother, a dangerous plan, and a street boy who saw everything. Stay until the end, because the truth about why this wife kidnapped her own children will leave you speechless. New York City, 1990. The financial district buzzed with power and money, where men in expensive suits made decisions worth millions before lunch. Alexander Rothschild was one of those men, 45 years old, CEO of Rothschild Financial Group, worth over $800 million. He had everything success could buy: a penthouse overlooking Central Park, a summer home in the Hamptons, luxury cars, private jets, and a beautiful family. Or so he thought. Alexander had dark brown hair, always perfectly styled, sharp, intelligent grey eyes, a strong jawline, and the kind of presence that made people step aside when he walked into a room. He stood 6'2", athletic despite his desk job, always dressed in custom Italian suits that cost more than most people made in a month. He was handsome, powerful, and completely blind to what was happening in his own home. His wife, Christina, was 38, a former model with long, flowing auburn hair, striking green eyes, high cheekbones, and a smile that had once stopped Alexander's heart. They'd been married 15 years, and they had 2 children. Sophie, aged 12, with her mother's auburn hair and her father's grey eyes, and James, aged 9, with dark brown hair and his mother's green eyes. They were Alexander's world, or at least he told himself that during the rare moments he wasn't working. The truth was, Alexander barely saw his children. He left for the office before they woke up and came home after they'd gone to bed. Weekends were filled with business dinners and golf with clients. He missed school plays and parent-teacher conferences. He forgot birthdays and anniversaries. He was building an empire, he told Christina when she complained, securing their future. But what he was really doing was choosing money over family, and Christina had reached her breaking point. On a cold November morning, Alexander's driver dropped him at the office as usual. He had back-to-back meetings all day, a conference call with Tokyo at midnight, and he'd probably sleep on the couch in his office again instead of going home. It was a routine he'd perfected over years, a routine that left no room for the people who loved him. At 3 in the afternoon, as Alexander reviewed quarterly reports, his secretary buzzed him. "Mr. Rothschild, there's a boy here to see you. He says it's urgent and about your family." Alexander frowned. "I don't have time for solicitors. Send him away." "Sir, he's just a child. Maybe 13 or 14. He looks like he's been living on the streets. He says if you don't see him now, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Something in her tone made Alexander pause. "Fine, 2 minutes. Send him in." The boy who entered Alexander's pristine office was a stark contrast to the polished environment. He was maybe 14 years old, thin and wiry, with shaggy light brown hair that needed cutting, intelligent hazel eyes that had seen too much, and a face smudged with dirt. He wore layers of mismatched clothes, old sneakers with holes, and carried a worn backpack. He stood about 5'6", small for his age, probably from malnutrition. But he held himself with a dignity that didn't match his appearance. "Mr. Rothschild," the boy said, his voice steady despite his obvious nervousness. "My name is Danny Sullivan. I live on the streets near your building. I see things. And what I saw this morning, you need to know about." Alexander glanced at his watch impatiently. "You have 90 seconds. "Your wife kidnapped your children," Danny said bluntly. Alexander's head snapped up. "What did you say?" "This morning around 8:30, I was in the alley behind your building looking through the dumpsters. A black van pulled up, no license plates. Your wife came out of your building's service entrance with your 2 kids, Sophie and James. She had suitcases. The kids were crying, asking where they were going, saying they didn't want to leave. Your wife told them they were going somewhere you'd never find them, that she was saving them from you. Then she put them in the van and drove away." Alexander stood up so fast his chair rolled backward. "That's impossible. Christina wouldn't—" "I know what I saw," Danny interrupted. "I've been watching your family for months. I sleep in the alley behind your building. I see your wife crying on the balcony late at night. I see your kids eating dinner alone with the nanny while you work. I saw your daughter's birthday last month, how she kept looking at the door waiting for you to come home, and you never did." Alexander felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. "Why should I believe some street kid I've never met?" Danny pulled a hair ribbon from his pocket, pink with small flowers. "Your daughter dropped this when she was getting into the van. I picked it up. It has her name on it, Sophie Rothschild. You can check with your building security, check the service entrance cameras. I'm telling you the truth." Alexander grabbed his phone and called his penthouse. No answer. He called Christina's cell phone, straight to voicemail. He called the nanny, Mrs. Chen. She answered on the first ring, her voice frantic. "Mr. Rothschild, thank God. Mrs. Rothschild took the children this morning. She said you knew about it, that it was a surprise trip. She gave me the week off, paid me in cash, and told me not to call you. But something felt wrong. The children seemed upset and Mrs. Rothschild seemed almost desperate." Alexander hung up and immediately called building security. "This is Alexander Rothschild in Penthouse A. Pull the security footage from the service entrance this morning, 8 to 9 a.m. Do it now." While security reviewed the footage, Alexander looked at Danny, really looked at him. This street kid had risked coming into a billionaire's office to deliver bad news. He had no obligation to share. "Why did you come here? Why tell me this?" Danny met his eyes steadily. "Because those kids deserve better. I watched your son crying in the van, holding on to his sister. I watched your daughter trying to be brave for him. They love you, even though you're never there. And your wife, she's desperate and scared, and desperate people do stupid things. Somebody needed to tell you before this got worse." The security office called back. "Mr. Rothschild, we have the footage. It's exactly as described. Mrs. Rothschild left through the service entrance at 8:32 a.m. with both children and 3 large suitcases. She got into a black, unmarked van. We didn't stop her because we assumed you knew." Alexander's world tilted. Christina had actually done it. She'd taken their children and run. But where? And why? He looked at Danny. "Did you see anything else? Hear anything? The van, which direction did it go?" "North," Danny said immediately. "Turned left on Park Avenue, heading uptown, and I heard your wife on her cell phone before she got in. She was talking to someone, said something about the cabin, and he'll never think to look there. Then she saw me watching and got in the van fast." The cabin. Alexander's mind raced. Christina's family had a cabin in the Adirondacks, a remote place her grandfather had built in the mountains. Christina had wanted to take the kids there for a vacation last summer, but Alexander had said no, he was too busy. She'd been furious. Could she have gone there? Alexander grabbed his coat. "I need to go, now." He looked at Danny. "Thank you for telling me. I won't forget this." Danny shifted uncomfortably. "There's more. Your wife, she's not thinking straight. I've been on the streets long enough to recognize someone at the end of their rope. She's desperate, maybe even dangerous to herself. Whatever you did to push her this far, you need to understand she's not the enemy. She's just a woman who feels like she's losing everything, including you." The words hit Alexander like a slap. "I never meant to. I was just working, building security for them." "You were building money," Danny said quietly. "Security would have been coming home at night, being at your daughter's birthday, knowing your wife was crying herself to sleep. I'm nobody, Mr. Rothschild. I live in an alley and eat from dumpsters. But even I can see you had everything that mattered, and you traded it for things that don't." Alexander stared at this homeless teenager who saw more clearly than he had in years. "How much do I owe you for this information?" "I don't want money," Danny said. "I want you to fix your family. Those kids deserve a father who shows up. Your wife deserves a husband who remembers why he married her. Go find them. And when you do, actually be there." Alexander nodded, something cracking open in his chest. "What's your name again?" "Danny Sullivan." "Danny Sullivan, I'm going to find my family. And when I come back, you and I are going to talk about getting you off the streets. That's a promise." Danny looked skeptical but nodded. Alexander rushed out, calling his pilot to prep the helicopter, calling the police to report the situation, calling everyone he could think of who might know where Christina had gone. But in his gut, he knew. The cabin. She'd gone to the place where her family had been happy before money and ambition ruined everything. The helicopter ride to the Adirondacks took 90 minutes. Alexander spent every second thinking about what Danny had said, about the choices he'd made, about the family he'd taken for granted. He remembered the day Sophie was born, how he'd held her tiny hand and promised to always protect her. He remembered James's first steps, how the little boy had walked straight to Alexander with absolute trust. When had he stopped being there? When had work become more important than the people who loved him? The cabin was deep in the woods, accessible only by a dirt road that was barely passable. Alexander had the pilot land in a clearing half a mile away, and he hiked through the November cold to the small log structure where Christina's grandfather had taught her to fish and identify birds and appreciate silence. The black van was parked outside. Smoke came from the chimney. Alexander approached quietly and looked through the window. Christina was inside with the children, helping them unpack. Sophie was crying, and Christina was holding her, whispering something Alexander couldn't hear. James sat on the couch clutching a stuffed bear, looking small and scared. Alexander knocked on the door. The movement inside stopped. Then the door opened a crack, and Christina stood there, her green eyes wide with shock and something that looked like fear. "How did you find us?" she whispered. "Can I come in?" Alexander asked. "Please, Christina, just talk to me." She hesitated, then opened the door wider. Alexander stepped inside, and immediately Sophie ran to him. "Daddy, you came! Mommy said we had to leave and you wouldn't come, but you came!" Alexander knelt and hugged his daughter tightly, feeling her shake with sobs against his shoulder. James came over too, more cautiously, and Alexander pulled him into the embrace. "I'm here," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry I wasn't before, but I'm here now." Christina watched from across the room, tears streaming down her face. "You should go. Take the children and go. I can't do this anymore, Alexander. I can't be married to a ghost. I can't watch our children grow up without a father while you live in an office. I thought if I brought them here, away from everything, maybe I could figure out how to be enough for them on my own." "You are enough," Alexander said, standing but keeping his hands on his children's shoulders. "You've been everything while I was nothing. But Christina, you can't just take them. You can't run. We need to fix this together." "How?" Christina's voice was sharp with pain. "How do we fix 15 years of you choosing work over us? How do we fix all the missed moments, all the nights I cried alone, all the times these children needed their father and he wasn't there?" "I don't know," Alexander admitted. "But I know I can't lose you. I can't lose them. A boy on the street saw you leave this morning, a homeless kid named Danny who sleeps in the alley behind our building. He came to my office and told me what he saw. Do you know what else he told me? He said he's been watching our family for months, that he sees you crying, sees the kids eating alone, sees me never coming home. He said I had everything that mattered, and I traded it for things that don't." Christina's face crumpled. "A homeless child could see what you couldn't?" "Yes," Alexander said simply. "And he made me understand something. I've been so afraid of failing, of not providing enough, that I destroyed the only things worth providing for. I don't know how to fix this, Christina, but I want to try. I want to be the husband you fell in love with, the father our children deserve. If you'll give me another chance, I'll prove I can change. Sophie pulled on Alexander's sleeve. Daddy, are you going to stay? Really stay? Not just for today? Alexander looked down at his daughter's hopeful, tear-stained face. Yes, sweetheart, I'm going to stay. Promise? James asked, his voice small. I promise, Alexander said, and meant it. They stayed at the cabin for 3 days. Alexander turned off his phone, ignored the frantic messages from his office, and focused entirely on his family. He played board games with the kids, helped Christina cook meals, talked late into the night about everything they'd been avoiding for years. It wasn't easy. There were hard conversations about resentment and loneliness and choices that had hurt. But they talked, really talked, for the first time in years. On the 4th day, they drove back to the city together. Alexander's first stop wasn't the office. It was the alley behind his building, where he found Danny sorting through a dumpster in the cold. "Danny!" Alexander called out. Danny turned, surprised. "You found them," Danny said, reading Alexander's face. "I did, because of you. You saved my family, Danny, and I meant what I said. You're not staying on the streets." Danny backed up warily. "I don't want charity." "It's not charity, it's an opportunity. I'm offering you a job, a place to live, and a chance to finish school. In return, you work part-time at my company, learning the business. You'll earn every dollar. But you'll also have a future instead of an alley." Danny stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because you cared enough to save my family when you had nothing to gain. Because you saw the truth when I was blind. Because I have resources I've wasted on meaningless things, and maybe putting them toward helping someone who deserves it will start to balance the scales." Danny was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I'll accept on one condition. When I finish school and understand business, you help me create a program for other street kids, give them opportunities too. Not all of them, just the ones who are trying, who have potential, who need a hand up." Alexander held out his hand. "Deal!" Danny shook it, and his life changed forever. True to his word, Alexander set Danny up in a small apartment, enrolled him in a good high school, and gave him a job in the mailroom at Rothschild Financial. Danny worked harder than anyone Alexander had ever seen, studying late into the night, asking questions, learning everything. Within 2 years, he'd graduated high school at the top of his class. Alexander paid for college, and Danny earned a business degree while working his way up through the company. But more importantly, Alexander kept his promises to his family. He restructured his company, hired a COO to handle day-to-day operations, and made sure he was home for dinner every night. He went to Sophie's soccer games and James's school plays. He took Christina on dates, remembered anniversaries, and slowly rebuilt the trust he'd broken. It wasn't perfect. There were setbacks and arguments and moments when old patterns tried to resurface, but Alexander remembered Danny's words. "You had everything that mattered, and you traded it for things that don't." He wouldn't make that mistake again. 10 years later, Danny was 24, a rising star at Rothschild Financial with an MBA and a reputation for brilliance and integrity. He'd never forgotten his promise. Together, he and Alexander created the Sullivan Foundation, named after Danny's late mother, which provided housing, education, and job training for homeless youth across New York. At the foundation's opening ceremony, Danny stood at the podium looking at the crowd of donors, politicians, and kids from the streets who were getting their first real chance at life. Sophie and James sat in the front row, now 22 and 19, both successful and close to their father. Christina sat beside Alexander, his arm around her shoulders, looking at the homeless boy who'd saved her family and become part of it. 10 years ago, Danny said into the microphone, I was living in an alley, eating from dumpsters, and wondering if I'd survive another winter. I saw something that morning that I could have ignored, a woman taking her children and running from a husband who'd forgotten what mattered. I could have walked away. It wasn't my problem. But I'd been watching that family for months, and those kids deserved better. He looked directly at Alexander. I told Mr. Rothschild the truth that day, not because I wanted something from him, but because it was right. What I didn't expect was that he'd listen, that he'd change, that he'd not only save his family, but reach back and pull me out of the darkness too. He gave me a chance when I had nothing, and that chance became this. He gestured to the building behind him. A place where other kids who have nothing can get everything that matters, hope, opportunity, and someone who believes in them. The crowd applauded, but Danny wasn't finished. But here's what I learned from all this. Money doesn't save families. Success doesn't create love. Being present does. Choosing people over profit does. Mr. Rothschild had all the money in the world and his family was falling apart. I had nothing, and I saw more clearly than he did. What saved them wasn't his wealth. It was his choice to finally show up, to be there, to put his family first. Alexander stood up, tears in his eyes, and hugged Danny like a son. Christina and the kids joined them, and photographers captured the moment. A billionaire, his family, and the street boy who'd saved them all together at last. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose between success and the people you love? Have you ever realized too late what really matters? Share your story in the comments, because these moments of truth define who we become. And if this story reminded you that family and presence matter more than any amount of money or success, hit that like button and subscribe for more inspiring stories about second chances, unlikely heroes, and the courage it takes to change before it's too late. Your engagement helps us share these messages with people who need to hear that it's never too late to come home to what matters most.